Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big ideas. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating collision, a showdown between the world of finance and the fundamental laws of physics. So, get this simple but honestly pretty radical statement. This is the key to our whole story today. And what's just amazing is that it comes from two completely different worlds, separated by centuries and, well, entirely different ways of thinking. On one hand, you've got Frederick Soddy. He's a 20th century Nobel laureate in chemistry, a guy who helped us understand the very nature of the atom. And on the other hand, we're talking about 7th century Islamic jurists, scholars working from theology and ancient texts. Okay, so that's the big mystery we're unpacking. How on earth did a scientist studying thermodynamics and a group of ancient religious scholars independently land on the exact same, very specific problem with the nature of interest? Let's get into it. To really solve this, you gotta understand a core concept. The world of finance and the real physical world, well, they grow in fundamentally different ways. They literally follow two completely different mathematical paths. Right, so first up, you've got the financial world, and this world lives and breathes by something called the J-curve. This is the world of compound interest. When you owe money, that debt doesn't just grow, it accelerates. It starts off kind of slow, and then boom, it shoots straight up. And check out this simple trick called the Rule of 72. It shows you just how fast this all happens. At an 8% interest rate, a debt will literally double in just 9 years. But here's the really crucial part. This math, it doesn't care if there's a drought or a pandemic or if your factory burns to the ground. The numbers demand their growth completely separate from what's happening in reality. Okay, but in nature, things are totally different. Growth follows what's called an S-curve. It starts fast, sure, but then it slows down, and eventually it just plateaus. And why is that? It's because every single physical system eventually hits a hard limit. You know, trees don't grow to the moon, right? And a single colony of bacteria isn't going to fill the entire ocean. In the real world, growth always runs into what biologists call its carrying capacity. There are always real physical constraints. And this, right here, is where the two worlds collide. When that J-curve of financial promises starts growing way faster than the S-curve of actual physical stuff in the world, a really dangerous gap opens up. It's a gap between what we've promised on paper and what actually exists. So let's dig a little deeper into the physics of this whole mess. This brings us right back to our Nobel laureate, Frederick Soddy, and some of the frankly startling things he figured out almost 100 years ago. Soddy had this absolutely brilliant insight. He said that money isn't just paper or numbers on a computer screen. No, at its very core, money is a claim on energy. Every single dollar is basically a promise that the real world will do some work for you. Just think about it for a second. You use your money to buy gasoline or food or electricity, all things that either require energy to produce or are a form of energy themselves. But here's the catch, the one Soddy spotted. We can create an unlimited amount of money with just a few keystrokes, but we absolutely cannot create energy out of thin air. And this table, wow, it just lays out the fundamental conflict perfectly. In the real world, we have the second law of thermodynamics, right? Entropy. It means things decay, barns rot, iron rusts. Over time, physical things lose value. But in the financial world of interest, time magically adds value. It is, as Soddy put it, a rebellion against physics. And this is where the story takes a wild turn. Because believe it or not, this is where our medieval scholars come back in. They actually developed a system that, without ever using the language of physics, happens to solve this exact problem. Okay, so think of it like this. A normal loan. It transfers risk. Let's say you borrow money to build a factory and it burns down. Well, that's too bad for you. You still owe the bank every penny. But the ideal Islamic model is all about risk sharing. The person with the money is a partner. If that factory burns down, they lose their investment too. Their potential profit is tied one-to-one with what happens in the real world. And the effect of this? Well, it's profound. It basically tethers the financial system back to physical reality. That runaway J-curve of debt, it just can't exist in this model because financial claims are not allowed to grow faster than the real world that's supposed to back them up. So a century-old scientific theory, an ancient economic model, why in the world should any of this matter to you right now? Well, because that collision they both predicted, it's not some distant threat anymore, it's happening. But and this is a big but, we've got to face an uncomfortable truth here. Even with this incredible blueprint, the modern Islamic finance industry has mostly just ended up mimicking the conventional system it was supposed to replace, just using complex products with different names. I mean, just look at the numbers. They don't lie. True profit and loss sharing, the very heart of this physics-friendly model, it makes up less than 6% of the entire industry. The vast majority of it is, for all practical purposes, just like interest-based debts. And in the meantime, that J-curve of global debt we talked about, it has gone into hyperdrive. We're now sitting on about $300 trillion of debt worldwide. These are all financial claims on future work, future energy, and future resources that honestly may not be physically possible to deliver. For centuries, we could kind of get away with this. We could ignore the problem because there was always a new frontier to conquer, more resources to pull out of the ground. The S-curve was still rising pretty steeply. But now we're hitting real planetary limits. The S-curve of our planet's carrying capacity is beginning to flatten out, all while that J-curve of debt is still trying to shoot for the moon. And that leaves us with the final, urgent question that this strange partnership between a physicist and ancient scholars forces us to ask. That gap between our financial promises and our physical reality, it can't just grow forever. So, what happens when it finally closes?